3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome everyone. I am Christina Bellantoni. I am the director of the Media Center and professor at Annenberg, and this is a workshop about ethics, newsroom norms, and work culture. And I'm really excited to be joined in this live workshop, where we do have some students with us, by some of our terrific student leaders and some of our really important members of the Annenberg team, and a very special guest star. So in no particular order, I will start with Professor Stacy Shoulder, who you're going to be hearing from. She directs our video program. You will work with her closely when you are assigned to ATVN. She's been at Annenberg for a number of years and has lots and lots of industry experience, as do I. And as does Tracy, who is our very special guest, former Annenberg Leadership Initiative Fellow. One more person coming in, adding to the chat here. Tracy Lee was an Annenberg Leadership Initiative Fellow in the last school year and subbed in for us today. We're really appreciative that you are our special guest. So thank you so much for sharing your experience with us for this important conversation. Edward Lifson is one of our audio coaches, working with the students assigned to radio, and you'll get to know him over the course of your time. And now we have 3 amazing students. Erica Herr is one of our co-executive editors this year. You're going to hear a little bit more from them, and I won't do super long introductions, and is eager to talk to you about her experience in the newsroom. Ayana White is one of our executive producers for ARN this year and worked all summer as a student editor and has held many jobs in the newsroom. And Nisha Venkat is here with us. You've had also a bunch of jobs in the newsroom, and this semester are doing executive producing with ATVN, and we're actually working together to look at newsroom diversity and some of these issues that we're going to be talking about in this workshop today. So, well, without further ado, I'm going to share my screen just for a second so we have something to look at besides me. Ta-da. All right, so it's not meant to encompass everything, and you should have watched the welcome video, which touched on some of these issues, but we really wanted to take a deep dive just to make sure everybody's really clear on what it means to work in this newsroom, and most importantly, how you treat each other. Effectively, this is a newsroom that has to put the very utmost importance on the fact that it is also a classroom, right? Our job as instructors, our job as the School of Annenberg that is funding the newsroom and building this into your programs, and also for people who are coming that don't have a curricular requirement, is to make sure that this is a newsroom where everyone learns, right? It is a classroom first and an outward-facing newsroom. And to do that, we absolutely have to uphold the highest standards of ethical treatment, of culture that makes everybody feel supported and recognized and appreciated, and to really make clear to everybody that there is no tolerance for disrespectful treatment, racism, or even an unwillingness to learn. You're here, you're getting either a degree or you're taking part in the newsroom. That's what we want you to come to the table with. No one is going to be perfect. There's a lot we're going to learn. We will learn every day till the day that we die. And so if you come to the table with that, everything's going to be fine. And it requires all of you as members of this newsroom, right? This is a job. You're working in the newsroom now. It doesn't matter if it's for a class or not, that you call out bad behavior, that you bring it to our attention immediately, and that you really think through your own actions and the way that you speak to people, and also think about, in journalism, every single choice you make is an important choice, right? Every word you use in a story, every image that you choose to put on the air, even the people that you choose to talk to for those stories, they're all a choice, and they can both reflect on you, on the topic matter at hand, and then also to the outside world. It sends a sense of your priorities. So you're going to learn a lot about that over the course of classes, whether they're at Annenberg or elsewhere. There's a lot of different ways we can talk through this, and we're going to give you some examples about what this means. But really challenge your own set of internal notions and the inherent biases that we all bring to the table sometimes, to make sure that you are including the widest variety of both perspectives and also just concepts into your work in this newsroom. And all of that said, if you're ever in doubt, or you have a nagging feeling, maybe you haven't done it right or you're not quite sure, just ask. That is one thing I wanted our faculty members and our coaches and everybody to be available for you for this, because we have decades of industry experience put together. I've made many mistakes over the course of my 21-year career in journalism, and surely I'll make some more, and I know many of us have, and that's the way we learn and we grow and we get better. It's by making those mistakes, correcting them, growing as journalists, and that's something you will all do in this newsroom. So please call on us, talk to us. We've covered any situation you will encounter, we have encountered it. People that are angry that they ended up in a story, people who didn't like the image that was used of them, people who said they didn't agree to an interview when they actually did, all of those types of things. So that's what we are here to do. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Stacy for a second, but I also wanted to point out that one thing that we would really like to take advantage of, again, with these industry experiences, that when you're working on this, a reminder that the students in the newsroom, the student-led newsroom, they're making the decisions on what gets covered. They're doing the final review. They're doing the final production, the final posting. We really need you to take advantage of the people like us, whether that's your instructor or coach or someone else, depending on what you're doing in the newsroom, to be your first set of eyeballs. I guarantee you it will make everything go more smoothly. And it will help the student leaders do their best work and really think about the big picture issues and the audience and all of the things that are necessary for getting something out there into a public-facing newsroom, if you lean on your industry professionals who can really help guide you. Whether that's a 2-minute conversation, a 5-minute review, or a heavy first edit if need be. That's what we're here for. That's what we're paid to do. And that's what we're going to be helping you with day in and day out in this newsroom. So Stacy Shoulder, I thought you could touch a little bit about why a respectful newsroom is so important and how students should really think about the morning meetings in particular, but just in general, how they conduct themselves. Thanks, Stacy.
Sure. Thanks, Christina. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so, this is the media center. Working in a newsroom is really, it's a great opportunity to learn. And it's also okay to ask questions about whatever you don't, you're comfortable with or you don't know. No question is a dumb question. And that's really, really important. I mean, we're all here to learn. And the truth is, I feel like I'm learning all the time. I'm learning from you. I'm learning from the stories that happen. I'm learning from people, that you are interviewing. So I think it's important to keep that in mind. And as you're learning things, somebody else is learning something else, because we all come to the media center with different experiences. And I think that's really important to keep in mind. So something that I may have a question about, you might think is a dumb, because I haven't seen the TikTok video and it's gone viral and you've already seen it how many times, it's come through your feed. So, I think we all have to be mindful that we are all living different experiences. And so, we all bring different things when we come together and collaborate and work together to create content. So, and the morning meetings, we have editorial meetings every day. And that's not to say we can't have other meetings later in the day. And we do sometimes when we decide to regroup and come up with some more ideas or there's breaking news. But when it comes to pitching stories, it's really important to think about, the diversity that USC is, because we're covering USC, and then the diversity that Los Angeles is, the city that we live, or that we are based in. I guess right now we're all over the country, if not all over the world, but that's a great thing. So right now we should take advantage of that. So if you're in another part of the country, bring those ideas, bring what you're seeing, what your experience is, because the diversity of perspectives is what we want, right? And so that'll just make it all the more, rich. I mean, we had students last semester who were in other countries, and we interview people in other countries. I mean, if there's anything really positive about working remotely, is that we can have people in different spaces all the time, and bringing that to our meetings and to our coverage of stories. So, and then I think the other thing about those meetings is, may not seem like a story to me, or may not seem like a story to one of the student leaders. when someone pitches, but I think we just all need to maybe rethink things and ask questions as opposed to being dismissive, right? So try to understand, why that person thinks something is a story, right? So really, I think questions and sort of being more curious will help everyone to also be more inclusive and maybe also more sensitive, right? To understanding, why do you think that's an important story, right? So I think kind of all of those things are important, and and it's just important to be good to each other, because the truth is, at the end of every day, it's just that one day, and we're all going to come back the following week, and when you work in a professional newsroom, you come back the next day. So I think it's also, you're going to develop habits that are really important here. If you ever work in a newsroom, or even if you ever work in some type of a collaborative workspace, to develop the habits of listening and being respectful and understanding that people come to that work environment with diverse viewpoints, and to be mindful of that, and I would say to embrace it, because it'll just make the experience that much richer.
That's great. Thank you, Stacy. Tracy, our special guest, thank you so much. And Stacy kind of talked about the pitching a little bit, which you will see Tracy. She recorded one of our workshops on pitching, which you will all get a chance to review and learn from, which will help you have those pitches that will help smooth everything along. So welcome, Tracy. Thanks for joining us. And yeah, you have anything you'd like to add to this idea?
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks for having me back. I feel like I'm kind of like a ghost. You can't get rid of me because I have unfinished business, and that is talking about ethics and diversity. I have a unique position, like Christina mentioned. I spent all of last year, the last academic school year, that is, at the Media Center as one of the fellows, kind of advising and guiding people. But before that, I spent about 8 years at NBC News and MSNBC, and half of that time was spent overseeing and consulting the network's coverage of Asian American and Pacific Islander issues. So when it comes to, making sure that your news coverage is diverse, there are obviously a lot of challenges that go along with it, but it's something that I think is increasingly important, especially in your classes and as you're learning and training to go into that real world, whether it is in a newsroom or in something that is news adjacent, just to be mindful of things like everyone has already kind of mentioned about the diversity of your sources. One of the things we used to always say to folks at the network is, when you think about identity, we should be treating different identities as the subject of the story rather than the object. So that's to say, if you're going to write about immigration, don't be like, oh, this is where we talk to people who we think will be able to comment on immigration, right? Find opportunities where you are diversifying the types of people that you're talking to. And, like Christina mentioned, and like Stacey mentioned, Los Angeles itself is incredibly diverse. It is a global city itself. USC is incredibly diverse. And oftentimes you'll start to see this in Slack if you've never been in the media center, but you can put into the general channel, hey, I'm looking to interview people across the world about this one topic. And like Stacey mentioned, because we are all remote right now, it is possible to do that in a way that perhaps we hadn't prioritized in the past. So I think that's incredibly important when it comes to diversifying your sources and thinking about stories. But then just in terms of the newsroom culture, you are here for a class, maybe you're here for a job, maybe you're here just to learn and kind of get your feet wet in this. This environment of the media center mimics very closely to what you might experience in a real newsroom, and just beyond that in the workplace in general. Excuse me. You want to make sure that any job that you're doing, any role that you're fulfilling, you cannot do that alone. Get to know the people that you're working with, and especially your student leaders who are trained and have experience in how to help you develop the best stories you possibly can. And also to confront issues. Like Christina mentioned, if there's an issue that has been that you face, there's someone who's probably experienced it. I know from my experience working with ARN a lot last year, there were often times where we'd encounter something, and if you talk to someone in the faculty or maybe one of your instructors, they'll say, we 100% dealt with that, and they're able to kind of help you navigate that. Like Stacey mentioned, I always am still asking anytime I need any sort of a second set of ears or just to bounce ideas off of or to ask for help, because that is what this media center is, first and foremost. It is a place to learn. There really is no such thing as a stupid question, which I know I have a hard time trying to tell myself and remember, because I'll often be like, well, I'm sure someone's already asked that. Still ask that again. You're here to learn, and there's always more to learn, because this field of journalism is constantly changing and constantly evolving. And at the same time, you might have knowledge to teach a student leader or a faculty member or your fellow peers that perhaps they weren't aware of. So if you sort of take ownership of the fact that you're coming into this space with a unique set of skills and interest and knowledge, and understand that your colleagues and people who are sitting next to you, or sitting next to you remotely, also have unique skill sets and interests, it just makes for a stronger newsroom and just a better and more respectful place in general.
I could not agree more. Those are awesome points. I'm going to turn it to the students now, and just as you guys are talking, I'm going to show you guys some things that you can find on our resources site. That's resources.uscannenbergmedia.com. We have so much there, but some of the materials that the students are going to talk through are going to touch on this, and so we'll show you where to find them. So Erica, Nisha, Ayana, take it away.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm going to quickly go over the policies and the etiquettes for how to interview when you're out on the field, specifically for online stories. So when you approach someone to ask for an interview, you should always identify yourself as an Annenberg Media reporter. In situations where you do have to go to an event, we highly suggest you to show some kind of proof that you're part of Annenberg Media. We usually have press passes, but because we're not in like the newsroom, we can't do that. So whether you reach out over email or other virtual methods, just try to identify yourself and make it clear as possible that you're a journalist. A second important thing is to ask them for their name, full name, and how to spell it so you can spell it correctly in your stories. And another thing is asking for pronouns and any specific nicknames that they prefer to use. And something that I personally really like to do before I interview anyone is I click on audio record on my phone, and I ask them for permission if I can audio record the whole interview for transcription purposes. And this is to ensure that when they say that they give permission to be recorded and have the interview on the record, you can have that for later purposes, because there's situations where sources do back out and say that they never gave you permission to have that interview or to be recorded. But if you have that saved, then you can like bring it up to them and say that, no, actually you did give me permission and I could use this in my story, so that they're very well aware of how these quotes will be used, and so you can be transparent about the whole process. And also, it's really important to know that sometimes sources will ask to see what quotes will be used ahead of time before things are published. It's our policy that we don't reveal that kind of information. The best way to navigate that situation is to let them know that their quotes won't be taken out of context, and that you can provide them with the official publication link once it's been published on the website. And then most importantly, afterwards, make sure you have contact information such as like a phone number or like an email, so you can share the story afterwards or ask any kind of important follow-up questions. And I'm gonna turn it over to Stacy and Tracy to talk about television and radio specific protocol for interviewing.
Sure, I can take it. Tracy touched upon this. For interviews, we're going to be interviewing a lot of people, and we put many of these people on the air. And so we just really want to be mindful of having diversity of voices. So, that's just, sometimes it's easy to go back to the same expert. And we've done that, but we really want to try to get different people, right? Different experts. And we have a lot of experts at USC, which is terrific, but sometimes it's nice, especially when we can do it via Zoom, that we can get experts from other universities, experts, doctors, economists, anywhere really. So, I mean, that's just something, to keep in mind. And then the other thing is when we try to get just sort of, we call person on the street interviews, that we really, again, want to reflect the community in which we live, right? So again, whether it's USC, whether it's Los Angeles, really, when you think about the United States, right? I mean, it's very diverse. And so we want to make sure that when we're trying to get a sampling of opinions, that we need to be mindful that the sampling of people is a diverse sample. So that and that can be across so many whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's background, whether it's, even now we can get people from different parts of the country. So, depending on what the story is, you just want to always be mindful of that. And, sometimes if it's very specific to USC, you can think about the fact that, do you want to get underclassmen? Do you want to get grads and, undergrads? Do you want to get, students from different schools, right? So that it's not just, we don't want to just get Annenberg students. We want to hear from students across the university.
And get your steps in. So walk all the way to the other part of campus. So you're not just leaving the media center and interviewing people right in front of the Annenberg building.
Right, absolutely. And which right now, it's a different, sort of a different animal here, but yeah, absolutely. We just want to get a lot of diverse voices, and the more the better. I would also say that try to get more voices, and then we can always try to choose, if we have to edit down, because it maybe we, but the goal would be to try to get as many as possible. And then when we are editing, to look to see, well, we got so many of this type of opinion and so many of this type of opinion, so we can try to get as much of that onto the air and as part of our story as possible. So Tracy, do you have, I don't know if you
yeah, very similar for any audio piece, and Erica kind of touched on this already. You might hear this pretty often in a lot of your workshops, but before you record anyone, you do need to ask for permission. That is the law, so don't start recording without somebody's knowledge. And always, like Erica said, identify yourself and what platform it's going to go on. If you're going to be using them for TV, for radio or podcasting, or if you're just using them for a text piece, just say, I'm so-and-so from Annenberg Media. I'm working on a piece for Annenberg Radio News. So I'm gonna need clear audio. And so is it okay if I use this? Always get that explicit permission. We did encounter that last year from time to time at the Media Center, where someone said, I never said you could record. And then we listened back to the full recording, which we had saved, and they had said it was okay. So you wanna make sure that they know why you're asking and what you're using it for. And it just helps protect you as the journalist in the long run. And, also gives you a little bit of safety net too. If someone doesn't like the way that they're quoted, well, they don't really get to dictate how they're quoted. Your interview, that is the part where you are having that conversation. And if you ever have a question about whether or not you can or should use a source, I know that Christina has this anonymous sources page up right now, but any of those types of questions, you're not expected to memorize the policies for every single thing that Annenberg might throw at you. These big ones like anonymous sources and other things that we'll talk about, you should know generally, but if you aren't sure, if you don't remember, that is definitely where you should ask before you make the assumption that you can or can't grant anonymity or use a certain source in a certain way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will point out, we are a multi-platform newsroom, and it's probably worth, I like what Tracy just suggested about specificity. It will be used for this, but you could also say, and it's possible others in the newsroom would use it elsewhere, right? It could show up on social media. It could show up on the air later, right? Some of those things do get shared along the way. So Erica, back to you.
Oh, that's all I had in terms of like policies about interviewing. I'll hand it off to the next student editor.
I can jump in.
Great.
I can give advice about finding sources, specifically now that we're going digital. There's hundreds of organizations on USC campus that we can reach out to if we're looking for student voices to give opinions about things. But also make sure you're thinking outside of campus, because Los Angeles is huge. There's a whole community of people that we can reach out to. Also make sure when you're getting student voices that you're not just reaching out to your friends, unless your friend is like the expert on whatever issue that you're reporting on. You can reach out, you can ask your friend if they're in a club, if they can put you in contact with someone else in the club, but just don't keep on reaching out to your best friends. Also, don't be afraid to use social media to DM people. You'll be surprised how many people answer and are willing to be interviewed. That includes like Twitter, Instagram, and even LinkedIn. You can DM people and ask them if they'd be willing to speak to you. So yeah, that was my part on sourcing, but also just when we're dealing with each other, make sure that we're all like very kind and considerate to each other. Follow each other, follow Annenberg Media on social media, follow each other on social media, and retweet and post each other's content. Make sure we're all supporting each other, because it's fun, first of all, And it really does a lot to like increase the feeling, like we say that we're the Annenberg Media family, and we need to really embody that.
Just to go back to the point about reaching out to friends who may be like experts in whatever you're covering, make sure that if there is a story being assigned to you and you're a part of that specific organization or something, to let your editor know so they could reassign that story to a different reporter, because that would be a conflict of interest and we don't allow that. So just make those things clear to your editor so they're aware.
That's right. Nisha, are you ready?
Yeah. I just wanted to talk a little bit about appropriate conduct over Slack, because whenever you're watching this, whether we're in a pandemic or not, you're probably going to be using Slack as, you know, your primary method of communication throughout the news days. So it's really important throughout the day to just make sure you're communicating explicitly and clearly, because it's really hard to convey tone and nuance over text, and you don't know how your message is going to be received on the other side. Also, just try to keep things civil in private messages or channels on Slack, and to kind of think for a second before you fire off something, because words have power and can be super empowering or damaging depending on how you use them. All in all, I think it's just important to make sure you're being professional like we would in any other newsroom, because we are journalists, not just play acting as journalists. And this newsroom has been super formative to me, as it is to you all, and we've just got to be mindful in how we approach each other. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
That's excellent. Thank you. So yeah, I've been trying to show these links. So we have, you know, our ethics guidelines, which go over all of these, and your instructor can kind of help you, but it's just worth reviewing. It's not very long. I will talk a little bit about anonymous sourcing and then on and off the record in just a second. And then I'm not sure if this will actually share, but we also have the guide to thoughtful language, which I started to show, which talks about, you know, going over why we frequently don't need to use race unless it's central to the story to describe someone, or the way that we use certain words related to gender. Those are all things that are important, and not just writing, you know, on the air, on the radio, and obviously online as well. So for anonymous sourcing, I will say that in general, you should start. You only have, you know, a set amount of time in the newsroom and not months on end to work on a story. So you should just attempt to be, again, really explicit with people. I'd like to quote you. I'd like to put your face on the air. I'd like to put your voice on the air. To just start on the record, right? Now, someone may have some information for you that they don't want their name attached to for a variety of reasons. We encounter this all the time. Maybe there is someone went to a protest and they're afraid of losing their job for having gone to that protest, and they say, you can only identify me by my first name. There might be an ability to do that, and that's where you're going to talk to your student editor. You're going to talk to somebody in the newsroom who has experience with this to talk about the best way to do it, and you're going to be really transparent with your audience. You know, said Jane, who requested we only use her first name out of fear of retaliation for losing her job for attending a protest, right? It's clear, it's specific. There are ways that you can shape that so that your audience is not confused or thinking less of you, or thinking that your news organization has less integrity because it's not quoting everybody by first and last name. Maybe somebody at USC, this happens all the time, says, on background, Carol Folt is going to announce that blank will happen at 3 p.m. You don't need that person's name. You could say something like, a university official, you know, let Annenberg Media know that there will be an announcement coming from Folt in 3 hours, something like that, right? That's kind of fine, but what you don't want is, Carol Folt is a terrible president, said a student who wished to remain nameless, right? There are reasons why we don't allow for anonymity, and particularly going after someone or making an accusation that you cannot verify, or just sharing opinion like that. There are thousands of opinions you can get out there, as we've been discussing. So best thing is, if somebody's not going to allow you to quote them by their first and last name, is to find a different source. We can talk much further about that in your questions and as we go forward, but that's like just a good rule of thumb. Now, sometimes you're going to call somebody who is maybe more experienced than you, probably more experienced than you in talking to the press. They're a source of yours, and they're going to say, you know, I need to go off the record. You just want to be really clear about what that means, right? In general, on the record is full access. Off the record, it should mean, and again, different people have different notions of this, you cannot use any of the information given you, and really you shouldn't be able to even repeat that to someone else. right? So that's where you really want to make clear, because sometimes the person you're talking to will say that when what they really mean is on background. They don't want their name attached to the information. A new school for cooking will be opening at USC, a source at USC said, right? That information, if you trust a source, you've shared with your editor who the source is, and you've been able to verify and get more information, like, you don't need a name attached to that, right? So there are just nuanced ways to think about it. We talked a little bit about corrections in the welcome workshop, but just really remember, people get stuff wrong every day. That's okay. It happens. We've all done it. The strong, right thing to do is to get it corrected immediately, whether that's you spell somebody's name wrong, or you get a fact wrong, or if there's something more egregious, you just have to talk to people about it right away so that the organization can communicate with its audience. Here's what we've corrected. Here's why we corrected it. There are a million examples that I can give all of you if you have questions. But again, do review our ethics policy, just here, and our guide to thoughtful language, and ask questions if you go. Let's see, I had a couple other things I wanted to point out. As far as internal newsroom conduct goes and things that you're experiencing, we will have very soon, perhaps even by the end of this day, but by the time people are watching this, 2 forms that are they can be anonymous Google forms that allow you to raise issues that you have in the newsroom. One will go first to me or whoever is serving as media center director, and there's a review process, and we communicate that to you in the language on the form as to where it would go next. And then one, if you're not comfortable coming to me or internally in the newsroom, can go outside of the newsroom, right? People at Annenberg will review it without coming to me or anyone in the newsroom unless necessary for follow-up. So that's something we want to make sure you all know, that you can do that. You can raise those issues. You can remain anonymous if you choose. And that doing so is really, really important to us to be able to make sure this newsroom is at its best at all times. So please let me know if you have any questions about that, and know that all of us have an open door, and we want to hear if you're experiencing any kind of problems. The other just final thing is we don't delete stories, tweets, ever. This is all in here. I think it's really important that everybody just remember that. You get requests all the time. Can you just take it down? No, we don't. And here's why: it keeps the news organization strong, which helps all of you. You don't want to be at a job interview 5 years from now and someone says, oh, that Annenberg Media, they're the ones that, never print corrections and delete stories when somebody complains, right? Edward, did you want to jump in and say anything?
Thanks. This is all really good. As you've been talking, I've been thinking something to keep in mind, and maybe this is just a way of thinking about what has already been said, but something to keep in mind is that what you don't put in your story is just as important as what you do put in your story. So I'll leave that. And then also with diversity, in addition to all the aspects of diversity that have already been said, I think diversity of thought is another one that we should bear in mind quite a bit. Thoughts maybe that never would have occurred to you. Those can be some of the most interesting, And a lot of the stories that we do are kind of short. Sometimes I'll hear a story, it's 2 or 3 minutes long, and there's 2 or 3 people saying the same thing. And I think it would be much more interesting if there were more points of view expressed. And finally, no, that's it. Yeah, good stuff, everyone.
Right on. I'll add 2 more things that you can also find on those policies, which again are found at resources.uscannenbergmedia.com. One is that we don't, for 99% of cases, we do not report on suicides. There's a detailed explanation as to why, and we can talk about it. You can talk about it with your instructor as well. And that can sometimes be difficult. We know that we faced some really tragic things that happened on campus a year ago. And I thought that we handled them very sensitively, and also the health and wellness desk sprang out of that to be able to address some of the issues that students are facing. And then we don't name mass shooters, right? The idea of no notoriety. That's something that some media outlets follow, some don't. Ruby, our executive editor from a year ago, wrote a really beautiful letter to the editor to the LA Times about this, that was published, like talking about why that's really important and why this newsroom adheres to that. And again, just want to reinforce, if you are in doubt, just ask. there is someone that is here to help you learn, that will really help make sure that you are succeeding in this newsroom and getting the absolute best ethical foundation that you can, which is going to set you up for success, whether you choose to be a journalist or choose to do something else. So I'm going to stop the recording now and thank everyone. We will see everybody that's watching this on video later. Thanks for bearing with us, and then we'll have a discussion with our students here. So let's see, there's a stop button. Thanks.